Hello, thoughtful viewers. Few episodes in modern history were as destructive to a nation's heritage and people than Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution in China. By inciting the youth against perceived bourgeois elements, Mao unleashed unchecked bloodshed that resulted in millions of deaths and immeasurable loss. Let's explore this complex legacy. In 1966, Mao Zedong, chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, launched the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, a devastating political campaign aimed at reviving revolutionary ideals and consolidating Mao's control over the party in China after a period of economic failure and political tensions. The Cultural Revolution upended society from 1966 to 1976 and unleashed destruction on a scale never before seen under communist rule in China. Origins of the Cultural Revolution. Mao had led the communists to power in 1949 after over 20 years of revolution and warfare. As chairman of the People's Republic of China, Mao embarked on radical programs aimed at rapidly transforming the country into a communist society. In the late 1950s, Mao initiated the Great Leap Forward, an attempt to rapidly industrialize and collectivize agriculture, which resulted in a devastating famine that killed up to 45 million people. This failure, along with the Soviet Union's move toward peaceful coexistence with the West and to Stalinization, appeared to undermine faith in the power of continuous communist revolution. By the early 1960s, Mao believed the party and government bureaucracies were threatening his authority and vision. To reassert revolutionary fervor and consolidate power, Mao turned to China's youth. In May 1966, he launched the Cultural Revolution, claiming bourgeois, capitalist and traditional elements had infiltrated the government and society, threatening the socialist project. Early stage and expansion, 1966 to 1967. In the spring of 1966, prominent leaders and academics denounced by Mao as bourgeois intellectuals came under attack by student paramilitary groups called the Red Guards. Violent class struggle and ideological battles ensued across China as the movement escalated. Schools and universities were closed as Red Guard factions vied for power, destroying anything deemed bourgeois or traditional. By 1967, society was in turmoil. Local party committees and governments ceased to function as Red Guards paralyzed the country. Following Mao's lead, party committees encouraged the Red Guards to attack all perceived enemies. At mass assemblies, victims were harassed, beaten and even tortured or killed. An estimated 1.5 million people died in the early violence. The Red Guards also ruthlessly destroyed cultural heritage sites, artifacts, temples, mosques, churches, tombs, and anything considered old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. Countless paintings, books, and scrolls were burned. Unapproved operas, plays, and musical compositions were banned. Destroying China's heritage served to sever links to the capitalist and feudal past, removing obstacles to Mao's thought. Climax and the downfall of Lin Biao, 1968 to 1971. By 1968, the situation threatened to collapse into civil war. On July 28, 1968, Mao ordered the People's Liberation Army to restore order and stabilize the country. Millions of urban youth were sent to work in the countryside under the Down to the Countryside movement, ending the epicenter of violence. However, political machinations continued. Lin Biao, a high-ranking general, emerged as Mao's chosen successor and led ideological attacks on the ousted party leaders. In 1969, intensifying border clashes brought China and the Soviet Union dangerously close to war. Mao officially designated Lin as his successor at the CCP's 9th National Congress in 1969. By 1971, tensions grew between Mao and Lin. Fearing he might be purged, Lin allegedly plotted a coup against Mao. This led to Lin dying in a mysterious plane crash in September 1971 as he attempted to flee to the Soviet Union. With Lin gone and criticism muted, Mao regained absolute power in the party. Later stage, ending the chaos, 1972 to 1976. By 1972, Mao sought to bring the anarchic Cultural Revolution to a controlled end. Schools slowly reopened and intellectuals returned to work. Zhou Enlai, now restored to power, stabilized government administration. Mao's last political campaign, the Criticize Lin, Criticize Confucius movement from 1973 to 1976 targeted Deng Xiaoping, Liu Shaoqi and other leaders again, signaling renewed unrest. Mao's health declined and he died on September 9, 1976. Soon after, the remaining members of the Cultural Revolution group were arrested and the entire movement was officially condemned. The turbulent era finally ended, but not before unleashing calamity and leaving deep scars. Damage from the decade of political and social upheaval shaped China for generations. Impact on society and culture. The full impact of the Cultural Revolution's devastation and destruction was enormous, shaping China's politics, economy, education, culture and society. An estimated several million people died as a result of persecution, executions, torture, beating, harassment or suicide. Millions more suffered imprisonment, seizure of property, interrogation or public humiliation. The 10 years of endless political campaigns brought national coordination and the economy to a virtual halt as industry, agriculture, transport and infrastructure were severely damaged. Education came to a near standstill at times, depriving an entire generation of proper schooling. The Red Guards destroyed thousands of years of Chinese traditional and religious heritage as part of the violent class struggle. The social order was utterly disrupted, upending trust, community and harmony. The trauma inflicted during the lawlessness, terror and chaos deeply scarred the national psyche. By inciting the youth against the Communist Party and state bureaucracy, Mao unleashed a political witch hunt that permitted unchecked persecution and bloodshed. The Cultural Revolution marked the ultimate utilization of class struggle and terror to retain power and control society. Legacy of Mao's campaign of destruction. The Cultural Revolution has been described as a lost decade of societal devastation and waste. Following Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping gradually introduced economic and political reforms that overturned much of the era's damage and guided China's rise over the next decades. While China's economy flourished, the trauma of the Cultural Revolution continued to linger. The party banned open discussion of the period, censoring media and scholarship. The facts remained suppressed as national memory and history were obscured. It was not until after 2006 that the Communist Party officially permitted limited public discussion of the Cultural Revolution. Historical analysis continues gradually, although censorship still exists and the party maintains authority over the narrative. Today, the true scale and atrocities of the destruction remain hard to fathom even for the Chinese. For 10 years, Mao unleashed violence and terror nationwide in pursuit of ideological purity and power. The legacy of cultural erasure, mass death, suffering and cruelty still haunts China. The enormous scope of Mao's campaign left society culturally impoverished and spiritually diminished. The Cultural Revolution's calculated destruction of tradition severed links to the essence of Chinese civilization. Yet the Chinese people's resilience and humanity has allowed new cultural blossoming and hope to emerge from the dark decay of Mao's revolution. The Cultural Revolution's legacy of devastation and destruction continues to haunt China decades later. While the nation has risen economically, the spiritual and cultural toll on society remains deep and profound. Though discussion of this era remains limited, acknowledging this dark chapter of oppression and turmoil remains critical for healing historical wounds.